Hello all. In this video, we will see two important functions of LISP programming language, that is CAR and CDR, right? So here are some of the examples taken, right? Now, if you see the first example, in the first example, we are given a list like this. Now, when you look at the first element of the list, which is CAR, now this happens to be a function, a built-in function of LISP, right? Now, what does this function do? So, you see, this is the description given for the CAR function. It is also called as first. Now, what does it do? It takes one argument. So, as you can see here, the one argument is mentioned over here. This is the one argument given. That argument must be a form. Now, what is a form? Form means something which you can evaluate. Now, here we are given quote list containing PHW. So, this is a form and it evaluates to list containing PHW. Okay. As it has been written that this form must get evaluated to a list, and you can see the form is evaluated to a list containing three elements. Now what does CAR simply does? CAR selects and returns the first element of the list. Now if you look at this list, the first element of the list happens to be P, right? So the output for the first example would be P. Okay. Similarly, if you look at the second example, in the second example we have used another function which is called as CUDR or CDR, and here is the description that a CDR or a CUDR or a REST, it also takes one argument, which is this is the argument which is given code BKPH. The argument must be a form. Since we have used code, that list becomes a form. When we evaluate the form must get evaluated to a list. So as you can see, the form will be evaluated to a list BKPH. Okay. And what does CDR or CUDR or REST does? It selects and returns the entire list except the first element. So if you skip the first element of the list, right, what would you get is the another list which contains KPH, right? The one thing you have to remember over here is output of CAR may or may not be a list, but output of CUDR is always a list. So likewise, if we solve the remaining examples, this this whole list will evaluate to a list which contains a list containing AB and a list containing CD. Right? So this will be the evaluation after quote list will evaluate to this thing, and then we are applying a CAR on this list. CAR selects and returns the first element of the list. So the first element of the list is a list which contains AB. Okay. Likewise, for this same list, this whole thing will evaluate to the list which contains two lists, right? What does CDR does? CDR selects and returns the entire list except the first element. So you just skip the first element of the list. Now if you just skip the first element of the list, the output will be a list which contains a list CD. If we continue using this approach, in the next case, when we evaluate this part, what we get is a list which contains a list containing AB and a list containing CD. Okay. Then when you apply a CDR on that, CDR would discard the first element of the list. So what we get is a list which contains a list containing CD. And then a CAR on that will select the first element of the list. And the first element of the list happens to be list containing CD. Okay. Likewise, for the next example, when you apply a CAR on this list, what you get is the first element of the list, which is AB. And a CDR on that will discard the first element of the list. So what we get is a list which contains. Next case, a CDR on this list will discard the first element. A CAR on that will select the first element of the list, and a CDR on that will give you a list which contains D. Finally, CAR on this list will give you a list which contains AB. A CDR on that will give you a list which contains B, right? And then a CAR on this will give you B. Okay. I hope you have understood this. Thank you.